All right, today's the day. We're going into A Bullet for the Shooter. This is the next book out of the Hit World series that we're going to be going into. And just to go ahead and answer the question before you get a chance to ask it, I didn't read Trash Man. Can I read Bullet? Of course. Hit World was written like the Marvel Universe. Just because you didn't see Iron Man, you're still going to enjoy Captain America. So each of these books that start out the Hit World series, we're introducing you. They're the origin story of some of the shooters. So today we go into Luther Sweetwater, the rookie of the team. Anyway, let's see what it says on the back of the book. So, Luther Sweetwater, a former Marine Corps sniper, was on the cusp of giving his Life Ender's badge, which would open the door to life-changing amounts of money, enough for him to get out of the trailer he lived in and to allow him to lead the lifestyle he had always envisioned himself living. There was just one problem. Getting the badge required an assassination under evaluation, and when it came down to it, Sweetwater found it was hard for him to achieve the dispassion required to kill someone for money. Then, before he could decide if the lifestyle was for him, someone begins killing life enders, and Sweetwater is put on the case to hunt down the killer. Unfortunately for him, unfortunately for Sweetwater, though, the killer already has him in his sights. So this was the book that got me into the Hit World series. I got to be the privilege of working with Bill Webb on this one. Thank you, Bill. And now let's go see what's in. Let's open up and get into the first chapter. Chapter 1. Downtown Dallas, Texas. Luther Sweetwater built his shooting nest on a table by the window, 7 stories above the busiest street in downtown Dallas. It was far enough back that it couldn't be seen from the outside, even from the hotel across the street, but close enough that he could get a clean shot at anything on the road below. The rifle, a custom-built, LEI-supplied version of the finished Sakuro TRG-42, chambered for magnum round, stood ready on its stand. His handler was the stern British woman named Miss Witherbot, no first name offered. She told Sweetwater to hit the target while he was on his way to work, thereby doing him a favor, it being a Monday and all. Sweetwater was saving him from a week of work. Probationary shooter Sweetwater chuckled appropriately, even though Witherbot's tone didn't sound like she was joking at all. Truth was, Sweetwater wasn't sure she could make a joke, but he needed some sort of mental defense mechanism. Maybe she knew that. The dispassion of killing someone strictly for money was hard for Sweetwater. While he had been asked repeatedly, they wouldn't tell him why he had to kill the guy. If there was a good reason, or if he was a target of a pedophile or a rapist, justification wouldn't have been an issue. But life enders didn't explain things to trainees. They just made arrangements. Sweetwater was in perfect position to take the shot when everything went to shit. He laid his head across the stock of the Sakau, slipped his cheek into the fitted groove along the top. It was as if they had made the stock just for him, which they had. Test firing it at the range, he put 10 rounds into a 2-inch circle at 1,800 meters. The rifle was perfect, his aim was precise, and he was ready to hunt. Not necessarily to kill a human being for money. He moved the scope up and down the lanes of traffic, using the magnification to inspect the cars as they inched along Main Street. The sweet fragrance of top-shelf gun oil filled his nostrils, not the cheap stuff they used in the Marine Corps, but the good stuff, M Pro 9. One refined drop and the action was as smooth as glass. The lens of the scope went black as a Cadillac came into view. Adjusting his sight to the rear bumper, Sweetwater found the telltale Texas plate that read, Big Cash. The target was in sight. He felt the veins in his temples pulse. Time to make your bones, 2-bit, he whispered. Sweetwater hated the nickname he'd been stuck with in the Corps, but like the pilots and their call signs, you didn't get to pick what everybody else called you. 2-bit is what his fellow snipers called him, and 2-bit he became. Now it was his call sign, or would be, if he ever got his badge and license to kill. Sweetwater touched his left thumb to the tip of his middle finger. Sensors in the gloves triggered a call to his spotter, who he hadn't been introduced to. PS 4213. Request confirmation. Hold. That inhuman single-word reply fed through an electronic scrambler that disguised all voice characteristics held the key to his fortune. A bead of sweat ran down his temple, and a rookie might have wiped it away, but years of intense sniper training kicked in and he ignored it. The caddy sat locked in bumper-to-bumper Dallas morning traffic, so he had time. A click in the earphone alerted him to the fact that someone else had plugged into the call. Then the unmistakable voice of the British bitch, Miss Witherbot, said, "Wait," in a tone that held more rigid authority than Sweetwater believed a single word could hold. She apparently had added another line to the call because it only took 2 rings before a strange man's voice answered. "Cooper here." "Mr. Cooper," said a computer voice that came on the line, "we're pleased to announce that the open enrollment into the Forest Green Healthcare Program has been extended." Then there followed another click as Cooper hung up. Witherbot's voice returned. "Please wait while we triangulate the location." Sweetwater knew she was talking to the spotter, not to him, and not just to him. For purposes of the evaluation, he was like a tool undergoing a performance test. He tried not to lose communication as he waited for the signal to shoot, but he couldn't help trying to guess if Witherbot's accent was really British or maybe Australian. He'd never been good at guessing accents. "Fucking telemarketers," he growled, forgetting the radio link was still open. "Is that a serious remark?" Yeah, sorry about that." He ground his teeth. First day on the job and he was already showing his ass. I hate for that to be the last thing I heard on this earth, to be a teleprompter." "What are you talking about, PS 4213? That was us. We need the target to give us a voice print for confirmation. And a healthcare questionnaire works quite well as a ruse. It's a necessary precaution." "Oh." He shut up and watched the Cadillac creep a few more feet through the traffic. Most snipers were hyper-focused while waiting for the kill shot, but Sweetwater's mind didn't work that way. Then the brake lights on the car flashed and the driver's door opened. "Spotter," he said, "the target's getting out. Am I good to shoot?" "Hold. I do not clear you to execute the contract." "How about you hurry those computers of yours? This is a perfect setup." The driver got out and opened up the car's back door. A dark-haired man emerged, wearing a light beige suit. He only got one step away from the vehicle when a woman's hand appeared in the open door, holding out a black briefcase. The man turned back to the door and crossed the scope with the target measuring on his forehead, just above the bridge of his nose. Sweetwater recognized him from the briefing the day before. "Spotter, I've got a visual confirmation. Robert Cooper." "Negative, probationary shooter," came the immediate reply. "Hold your position. The trace has confirmed your target is in Toronto, Canada." "The hell he is. I can see his face. He's down there right now." "I said hold, shooter. You are negative for taking the shot." The target took his briefcase and walked along the sidewalk. The rifle's scope was now centered on the back of his head. An easy shot. "Damn it, what's going on?" "We have to rerun the tracing program. Your target is tracing from Toronto." "Well, your computers are wrong. I'm telling you, that's the guy. He's right there." Witherbot broke back in. "If you're so certain, PS 4213, then you have an option to verify the target's identity using alternative methods." "How the hell do I do that?" Sweetwater knew he didn't sound professional, but she was starting to piss him off. They had a perfect setup that was quickly going to shit. What was an old saying? All plans fail apart at the first contact with the enemy? "I don't want to lose this shot, spotter. Now give me the go and we'll have the money in the bank." "You're talking to me, PS 4213, Witherbot said. "You can use your phone's fingerprint scanner and we can get the contact's thumbprint. That'll verify his identity." "How the fuck do I get his fingerprint?" Her tone was like a scolding English schoolmarm from an old movie. If you want your place in this company, PS 4213, then be more resourceful and figure it out. Transmit the print as soon as you have it. I'll be waiting, and remember, you're currently not authorized to execute the contract, so any collateral damage is on you. Be careful. Oh, and one more thing. Don't curse when speaking to me. Is that clear? He waited, but she clearly expected an answer. Yes, ma'am. His earwig clicked as she disconnected the call. Damn. He looked around. The hotel room was a perfect sniper's nest, with a picture window overlooking the road. He'd selected the ammo load to blast through the car's window if need be, while still maintaining lethal force. Plus, for Sweetwater's purposes, it had a comfy bed and an ice machine down the hall. Hell, it even had cable TV. Snatching up his Texas Rangers ball cap and a bright blue windbreaker as an improvised disguise, Sweetwater headed out the door. Disgusted with how such a relatively easy assignment had gone off the rails, he flipped over the Do Not Disturb sign and moved it to the outer door handle. I hate field work, he said, and sprinted down the hall to the staircase. There, he'd have to hurry. All right, small chapters in my book, so Chapter 2. Downtown Dallas, Texas. Sweetwater shouldered his way through the crowds of pedestrians rushing to beat the clock and get to work on time. Whenever he stopped to crane his neck and search for the target, Mr. Cooper, people bumped him from behind and walked away cursing. He tried to speed it up since it was less than 2 blocks to Cooper's office, and once inside, there was no way Sweetwater would make it past the front counter security. And even if someone managed that, he couldn't imagine how he'd get Cooper's fingerprint. It's not like he could ask. Pardon me, sir. Please to verify your identity so I can kill you? Vicious curses followed him as he bowled through the crowds, no longer bothering with maneuvering politely around walkers. The sounds of downtown Dallas during rush hour filled his ears with a storm of blaring horns and screeching tires and screaming drivers. Somewhere ahead of him, an engine roared above a deafening din, followed immediately by the unmistakable crash of breaking glass and the squeal of metal scraping metal. A car wreck. But Sweetwater ignored it because business lay elsewhere, until a crowd of onlookers started gathering, completely blocking his way. Sweetwater shoved and pushed, but it was no good. He could never catch up with Cooper now. Then he heard more screeching tires, followed by another crunching impact. A car horn blared like a wailing siren. Shards of steel and glass rained down on the bystanders, who were scattering like a flock of gazelles after a gunshot. Sweetwater sprinted down the rapidly clearing sidewalk to the intersection, not caring who he knocked down. Dread filled his stomach. He didn't know why. He didn't believe in premonitions, and yet, once at the corner, the scene was clear-cut. A semi had turned left. A small Mercedes had turned right at the same time, and the sports car was now wedged up to its shattered windshield under the semi's trailer. The lady behind the wheel was in a full-grown panic mode. The car's window muffled her screams as she wriggled against the airbag, but the horn worked just fine. The crash had jammed it in the on position. The second accident involved a mid-sized Chevy that was obviously following the sports car and failed to stop in time. Rear-ending the Mercedes, it must have just glanced off the back of the driver's side quarter panel, because now the little Chevy lay angled in the middle of the street. The 3 cars together formed a neat little triangle in completely blocking the intersection. A middle-aged woman grabbed Sweetwater's shoulder, and her voice in a shriek of panic. "It hit him! Can you help him?" She was pointing to the middle of the mess, and he followed her finger to the Chevy. The driver was unconscious, laid out across the steering wheel. Either the car didn't have an airbag or it didn't deploy upon impact. While smoke plumed from the seams of the engine hood, obscuring his vision and adding to the overall chaos of the accident, the woman jerked on Sweetwater's jacket sleeve and pointed again to the middle of the accident. "No, not the driver. The car hit a man who was in the crosswalk. It ran him over." Most of the crowd that had run away from the shower of debris was now holding their phones, either taking pictures or videotaping the carnage. None of them appeared to be calling 911. Sweetwater's core training kicked in, and he ran to help. From a dead run, he slid across the trunk of the Mercedes and landed between the three cars. Steam and smoke boiled up from all three vehicles. He smelled hot oil and gasoline. One of the radiators hissed from a puncture. Sweetwater found Mr. Cooper splayed out on the pavement like a roadkill armadillo, blood covering the side of Cooper's head from a deep slice on his scalp. One leg was trapped under the Chevy, but he was still alive. His eyes were open, and he gasped for air. Sweetwater dropped to one knee to check his pulse. He pressed his fingers to the side of Cooper's neck and felt a pulse, but it was weak, and it was running as fast as a hummingbird's wing. Blood flowed from a thick ribbons from his mouth and nose, and when he coughed, crimson bubbles covered his chin. Sweetwater steadied Cooper's face and looked him in the eyes. "Mr. Cooper, we've called for help," he said, hoping it was true. Surely somebody had. "Stay still, don't move. The paramedics are on their way." Then Sweetwater realized that he was actually trying to help the man, whereas minutes before, Cooper was a target to kill in fulfillment of a contract. Now, lying on the hot asphalt in a spreading puddle of blood, the target had a name, had become an actual person. A more experienced hitter would have ended the man's pain and collected on the contract, where there were witnesses or not. Sweetwater knew that that's what he should do. God knew that he needed the money, but he wasn't cleared to kill the man. Damn it. Suddenly, Cooper reached up and grabbed his arm with the powerful grip of a man who knew he might be dying. He pulled Sweetwater close and spoke in a croaking whisper, which was barely audible over all the noise. I have a daughter. You have to help me. I can't leave her like this," he said between coughs, which left a fine spray of blood splattered on Sweetwater's cheek. The would-be shooter reached out to peel Cooper's fingers from his coat sleeve, but he couldn't do it. "Mr. Cooper," he repeated, "help is on the way." Reaching under the man to pull him into a sitting position, Sweetwater stopped when Cooper screamed in pain. He jerked back, afraid somebody saw him. Fortunately, the smoke and the imminent likelihood of a fuel tank explosion kept onlookers at bay. "I've got money," he begged. "Help me. I'll make you rich." Tears ran down the side of his face. He coughed again, and more blood spurted from his mouth. "I can't die like this. My phone. Can you help me find my phone? I need to call my wife." Sweetwater put his ear up to Cooper's lips to hear him. "Sure." Sweetwater wasn't sure why he was helping the man, but he pawed through Cooper's coat pockets to retrieve the phone. He didn't know why his hand shook when he turned the phone and held it to where the dying man could see it. "Call Shelley." Luther felt like a thick line of sweat running down between his shoulder blades as he crouched in the middle of the intersection. The phone rang 4 empty rings. Sirens screamed on the background, and they were still a few blocks away. If he acted right now, he could still complete the contract before they arrived. After 6 rings, it clicked over to a voice recorder. Cooper gave a weak laugh. His head dropped lower and lay on the bloody asphalt. His skin grew pale. "Hi, honey. I love you and Jenny with all my heart." He panted and sucked in a wet breath. I just wanted..." And then his hand fell away from the phone and his head slumped. Sweetwater reached out and lightly felt his chest. 2 shallow breaths later, it stopped moving. Sweetwater snatched up the phone, hung up, and slipped it into a jacket pocket. Still kneeling in the middle of the road, he apologized to the dead Mr. Cooper that he couldn't save his life, the life of a man he was paid to kill. A heavy sense of guilt and sadness settled over him. "Is he all right?" A woman's voice from somewhere behind the Chevy. "I called 911." It took all he had to pull his eyes away from the dead man. That's when he realized what death really looked like. Being a sniper had always felt like playing the world's most realistic video game. There was no screaming or crying. Line up the crosshairs, squeeze the trigger, and presto. It was just a simple point and click. And of course, he never actually shot anybody. He clambered back over the Mercedes. It was empty now. Someone had opened the passenger's door, and the lady was standing on the curb, screaming obscenities at the empty tractor trailer. Sweetwater craned his head around to see the rig's passenger door was open, and there was no driver anywhere, evidently fleeing the scene on top of whatever charges were headed his way. What the hell? How much worse could it be? The woman on the corner was back. She put her hand on his chest, and Sweetwater shrank back. He didn't like being touched by strangers unless they were some hot, young, and female. She only scored 1 out of the 3. What happened? The excitement of the crowd was infectious. Some heard the question, saw blood on his hands and his sleeves, and gathered close to eavesdrop. He didn't make it. Sweetwater retraced his earlier steps and shook his head. Mr. Cooper's pale death mask was burned into his memory. The moment he died, Cooper's gory face had taken on a surprised look Sweetwater would never forget, as if seeing something beyond the world of men, remembering it. He wanted to be anywhere except near the dead man. His pace increased until he was running from the scene of the crash, until he found an alley where he leaned against one wall. Now I get over it, he mumbled, panting, the confession falling unheard. Everybody warned me. The closest I ever got to action was tagging paper targets. Turning into an alley, he slowed to a shamble. Fleeing, hungover, he moved away from the bloody street. God help me, I didn't know. All right, so this is the first chapter of Bullet for Shooter by me and Bill Webb. So Larry Hoy and Bill Webb. There'll be links on the bottom of Amazon. Love for you to reach out there. Tell me if anybody's actually listening to this. You can find me on First Chapter Podcast, Larry Hoy author. But this has been Bullet for Shooter. What put me in ink? Thanks, guys. Have a great week. Hey, thanks for staying to the very end. So, this has been First Chapter Podcast by Larry Hoy, biker writer legend. You can find me on Facebook, Larry Hoy author, or you've got access right now on my YouTube channel. So be sure you subscribe, click the button down there. That way you'll be up on all of them. I release videos about once a week. If you want your book to be, if you're an author and you've got your book ready, send me an email. Let me reach out to you and we'll get your book on First Chapter. In the meantime, if you'd love to support my page and my mission, boom! Right there, Demon's Kiss is the most recent in the Hit World series. It's the continuating story of Luther Sweetwater, the rookie of the team. So, until next week, stay good, y'all.